My name is Don Giller. You may know me as Mason from the TV series The Lives of Lauren Green. You're watching a very special episode of the Letterman Podcast, a look back at 100 wonderful years, 100 wonderful episodes.
Worldwide Pants proudly presents
The Late Show with David Letterman.
Worldwide Pants, the most trusted name in pants and entertainment and pants.
We all believed in Letterman. We all believed in his talent. We all believed in his vision. And eventually we all kind of understood what he was trying to do with the show. And despite the fact, and look, Letterman had reverence for show business also.
Absolutely.
You know, he loved Carson. He loved, he was a big movie fan. Letterman was a very learned guy in the business. And knew all the agents. He never let on that he was, but in the beginning he had a hustle like everybody else. Yes. So I think he had a lot of respect for the business. But then we realized we wanted to deconstruct the business. Yeah. And once we all kind of got that was the mission, we just loved it. What could be more fun, And Hal was the leader of it. Hal was the greatest at it. Between Merrill and Hal. Yeah. Hal did visually what Merrill was doing on paper.
Yeah.
I always looked at Hal like another writer on the show, except he was looking for the visual joke.
I felt like I was so fortunate to have followed and been around on a daily basis Merrill Marco, who really was the she was the Egyptian overseer at the base of the pyramids, and Jim Downey, and actually all the writers. I just thought everyone in your 20s, you think that was some golden age. But I've been on other writing staffs, and they're all interesting and fun in their different way. But the Letterman group still seems to me to be a special golden group that was really trying to make each other laugh and do unusual things, not for any credit or groundbreaking thing, but just because they could, and no one was bothering us too much from the network or anything. So yes, we all stand on the shoulders of giants so that we can see that those last 6 weeks of the show.
It was nice because you hear, I never worked at Saturday Night Live, but you often hear that it's kind of a cutthroat environment, and I mean, I don't know if it's testimony to having to do a show every day. At some point, you're going to need favors from everyone on staff, just because there's just so much chaos and so it was really, really a nice place to work. Everyone really looked out for each other, and that's why I stayed there a ridiculously long time. I was probably there total of 17 years, which is crazy in TV to stay someplace that long. But the reason is because they became my friends, and I ended up marrying a woman who worked there, and it was really a great environment.
I think people in general are very protective of Dave.
Yep.
And of all of us.
Yep.
Regardless of the joke that I started with, it was not a hellhole.
No.
I've worked in really bad fucking shows and bad
It was
jobs.
a family, Fred, a generational family, by the way.
It was weird. It was weird that, and there were people who were mad at each other, and some people,
like any family. Absolutely.
Like any family. But again, because of who we were and what point in our careers, we were making ourselves up as much as we were making the show up.
I do have one about maybe something that a reason something inspires such fandom is it's like the usual business of show business is okay. Try to find out what people want and give it to them. You know, just what have they liked before? Well, let's package it and give that to them. And every now and then, you give people something they didn't know they wanted.
Yes.
And that was very much, that was very much the Beatles. Well, they were great. They were better than everybody before or since. But also, wait a minute, they're British. They got long hair. They're wearing suits. There's 4 of them.
Yep.
They're doing drive-in rock and roll with these devastating block harmonies. How are you going to see that coming? And you can't. And it's just, and everybody said, okay, if you give them something what they want that they didn't know they wanted, then they'll follow you anywhere. You've opened up a new world to them. And Letterman, we weren't the Beatles, needless to say, but still, everybody saw this thing that, as we talked about, wait a minute, this is this is familiar, and yet everything's wrong, and the wrongness makes it right. Somehow his genius was able to synthesize these contradictory elements. For those guys to go work at Letterman, it wasn't just thinking, I'd like to do something like that. No, I'd like to do exactly that. When Letterman retired, Conan wrote an essay about when the show first came on, and he said something to the effect of everything was wrong. And yet it was all right. And what he meant, it's sort of like, okay, Letterman he's nice looking, but he's got a gap in his teeth, and he's wearing a suit like a talk show host, but he's also got sneakers on.
Yes.
And just there were just contradictions abounded that he seemed, well, just that someone who seemed averse to backslapping.
Yes.
And had wanted the schmooziest job there was.
Yes.
To be a talk show host.
Yes.
And every talk show host, more or less to that point, had been, hey, it's great to be here. We've got some great stars. Everything is great.
Celebrating show business.
Yes, celebrating show business. And Dave, would revel in the awkwardness, would occasionally seem cranky, which especially at the beginning of the show, he was a young curmudgeon. And he was parading stars out, and yet you could sort of tell he was thinking, this is a little ridiculous, isn't it? Show business.
Yep.
Worshiping of celebritydom. So, I mean, when he would talk on the show about like, so many great shows with marvelous stars. He would say marvelous stars.
With a smirk.
Yes, and it was so funny coming from him because you knew it wasn't heartfelt. And okay, basically the first thing I remember writing for the show is after I got sent in the office, Steve said, hey, we do these promos every night, and we would record them during a break in the show, and they would toss them on the air one time during prime time.
Yep.
It was just a little 10-second thing, and it would just be tonight on late night, Charles Grodin, Terry Garr, and Stupid Patrick. So join it, and then just a little phrase, a little half joke, and I wrote, so join us, won't you? The password is fun.
A lot of the staffers had odd previous careers. I had written greeting cards, and in my last week at the greeting card job, the executive in charge brought me into his office and shut the door and said, Steve, I know you have your heart set on going to New York and seeking your fortune, but I think if you stay here and keep going the way you're going, you could be the next Bob Hammerquist. And
yes,
I had no idea who that was. It turns out he was like the top greeting card writer.
The legend in the greeting card community.
I demurred on that. And then, of course, foolishly told the story to Dave a year or two into our relationship, friendship, co-worker status. Well, of course, he loved the name Hammerquist to begin with. He liked words that way. Yeah. But whenever I would disappoint him or fall short, and that would be often, he would go, well, you're no Hammerquist.
See?
But come on, we would both laugh.
I don't ever say no, and there's one person responsible for that, and there's another person which is Steve O'Donnell.
Oh, wow.
And Steve O'Donnell, when I was sort of a punk intern, I looked around and saw all these people who were writers on the show, and thought, well, I'm a dramatic writer. I want to be a playwright. I bet I could figure this out and crack this nut. So, and it was a very arrogant thing to think. I mean, these were the elite of the elite writers of comedy at the time, and Steve O'Donnell was the head writer. And I gave him my submission packet, which I still have, and it was fucking terrible. It was really bad, and a lot of those writers, not a lot, but a few of them were not very friendly. And Steve O'Donnell, who had the most coveted job in late night television or in television at the time, and has to produce a show every single day. This wasn't like, Chris Rock won the Emmy every year and did like 8 shows a year.
Yep.
This is 200 shows a year, and the quality never can lower, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Steve took my packet and he said, I'm going to take you to lunch. No gain for Steve O'Donnell on this at all. A nice guy thing. I didn't ask him to go to lunch. He said, I'm going to take you to lunch. We went to Sparrow. He went through page by page with me my material, and was encouraging, but also realistic.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that kindness that he showed me. And it's been my privilege to work with Steve on maybe 6 different shows since, and hire him since then, from Rosie O'Donnell to Bonnie Hunt to Norm Macdonald to The Man Show to Jimmy Kimmel Live. He has been an integral part of my career and my life, and is a guy that I love more than anyone. And it all started with him showing me kindness at a really vulnerable time in my career. So I think about it all the time.
I will mention, in a sort of back down to earth way, that I have several dozen notes from Dave scribbled on the actual typewritten pages of jokes where he did a joke and it did not go well, or there was some unforeseen turn of events. Like, I remember he did a joke of mine one night about Karen Carpenter.
I guess you read recently in one of the major news publications about they're tightening up the test now for naturalized citizens. Say you come to this country and want to become an American citizen, you can't just walk. Well, I guess you can, but you also are supposed to take a test. And the traditional questions, what about President Lincoln? What about President Washington? But the new test now, they've really cracked down. You've got to be able to tell the difference between the Carpenters and Captain and Tennille. They have... And was that ugly? Was that a kind of a net? No, these are just jokes, ladies and gentlemen. Now,
the next day she was dead. And he circled the joke and said, I hope you're happy, Steve. Like, how did I didn't. Anyway, in the right atmosphere, a failure can be as funny as a success. And that's definitely something we took to heart at all of the various Letterman incarnations.
Number 1, Merrill Markoe.
Genius.
Yeah.
Genius. The heart and soul of the operation. The creator of the show, the creator of the sensibility, the beacon behind the comedy, the beacon behind the writers that we hired, the tenor of everything.
Yeah.
She was she is a brilliant person.
Steve O'Donnell.
Steve O'Donnell was another genius. Yeah. Steve O'Donnell was, another guy that carried the torch, carried the sensibility. Steve is a lovely guy and a great writer, and was a great head writer. There was always an argument that he created the top 10 list, and Adam Resnick was the judge who heard me create the top 10 list. I didn't actually create it. I had the idea. We were standing in the reception area at the old show, and I had just gotten a copy of People magazine, who did the 10 most beautiful people in the world.
Yep.
I said, something, we should do our own 10 best list. At which point Steve O'Donnell says, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll write some up. And he crafted it as the top 10 list, even though it was my suggestion that we do our own list. So Adam Resnick used to get pissed off when Steve O'Donnell would take credit for creating it. He goes, "You took credit. You did it. Why don't you tell Steve?" I go, "What do I care? You know, it's a big
Things that almost sound like
Steve was great. Steve was great. Steve had a monster of a job. It was, you know, being the head writer on that show, you know, you're administering a staff of 12, 15 people. You're dealing with a piece of talent who's very choosy, who likes one out of every 50 jokes. And then, you know, the deadline would always come and Steve would be, you know, it would be 4:30 and we'd be going down to the studio at 5 and we'd have to load the Chiron and do whatever we had to do. And Steve didn't have an act one. And God bless him, he'd always come up with an idea. Letterman would say, "No, that's horrible." You know, I remember once, the one that I remember so well was Steve said, "Let's go take a camera on the street and we'll find a baby and we'll bring the baby up." And Letterman goes, "Yeah, and then what am I supposed to do? What do I do with the baby? Do I diaper the baby?" You know, and we would do it and it would be funny. Letterman would be great. You know, it was just, poor Steve. I adore Steve.
Me too. My boy, Dan Kellison.
Daniel Kellison, I always described, and he gets pissed at me. I would always describe Daniel Kellison as a little puppy dog. He would come and like a puppy, he'd rub his head on your leg and you'd push him away. And he'd rub his head again on your leg and you'd push him away. And the third time, he'd rub his head on your leg, you'd pick him up, and he'd pee on you. Daniel was always the guy that would bug me. "Let's let so-and-so come in on a horse. Let's fly Sean Connery in on a jetpack." And then it would something would get fucked up. And I go, "Daniel, why do you have this? Why don't you have that?" Daniel was the most creative segment producer we ever had. And I was a segment producer, so that's high praise. Daniel always had great ideas. It was always a process getting there. But Daniel's a creative, talented, fun guy. And I'm still friends with him. And he'll get pissed at me for using the little puppy dog, but he's heard me describe it about 50 times. So
he's been on the show.
And I've worked with Daniel since. Daniel and I did the Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year awards together. We did, I think, 3 or 4 of them. You know, so he was always very good to me, Daniel.
I just appreciate him so much. He told a version of the Madonna story on this show that was just fantastic. I
Letterman used to blame me for Madonna. Letterman got pissed at me because he had heard, and his assistant probably told him, she used to squeal on everybody, but it wasn't true, that I told Madonna, "Just get out there and say dirty things and do whatever you want." And I think Kellison maybe did it, but Letterman thought I did it and was pissed at me for months. Months didn't talk to me because he was mad at me that I put Madonna up to it.
Pete Fatovich.
Pete Fatovich, the funniest guy you'll ever meet. Just not even trying. Not even trying. He was an original. He brought fun to the show. We loved seeing him. He would get annoying at times, but always a joy to be with. And he had some tragedy in his life at the end, but was a good man. And Hal took very good care of him, and he would direct. And Pete was a good guy.
Chris Elliott.
Chris Elliott was a natural. Started as an intern and pushed his way on the air, and always delivered. Always delivered. Never let us down. And ultimately, his pieces on the show were probably the biggest laughs I'd have on that show. I would just laugh my ass off at every piece he did. I just found them endlessly entertaining. A genius. I mean, a true genius in his own way. And unfortunately, it was the best he ever was. And that partnership and that trust between he and Dave, he hasn't recaptured it. And it's a shame because he's so fucking talented. He's so good. Great confidence. And, just the funniest shit. The Morton Downey stuff, the Brando shit, the Guy Under the Seats. I mean, classic pieces. And he and Adam Resnick, who is one of the geniuses as far as I'm concerned. And when we started Worldwide Pants, Adam and I produced a show called The High Life. I don't know if you remember it. It was a great show on HBO. We sold it to HBO. And Adam had the vision. He wanted to do it in black and white. And HBO let us, Chris Albrecht, God bless him, let us do it in black and white. I got fired after the pilot. And I think they did 10 episodes and it didn't do anything, but it was a genius show. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's great.
Let's see here. Okay, so we've talked about this person. We've talked about this person. We've talked about this person. Let's do Madeline Smith-Kirk.
Madeline is a force of nature. Madeline's the most enthusiastic, funny, who had a talent that I don't know where the fuck she got it. She had a talent of finding the most obscure, but where Madeline, there are a lot of people that can find them, but Madeline was great at vetting them and knowing how to milk it for comedy. Yeah. Madeline was a very funny, very smart woman. And she not only, there are a lot of people that can find interesting, creative, nuts, but if you don't create the dialogue and you don't know how to produce it to get the jokes, that's where Madeline was brilliant. She knew how, and the combination of what she fed Letterman and what Letterman did on his own, was genius.
Yeah.
And Madeline is terrific. I adore Madeline.
Yeah, fuck it. You know what? Let's finish off with and
then come on, give me more names. I'm enjoying it.
No. Okay, well, okay. So the one that's to me that's close to my heart, because this show wouldn't exist without him, is Shecky, Rick Sheckman.
Shecky was an enigma. I mean, he in death, Shecky has proved everybody wrong. I think everybody looked at Shecky as a guy who had no life. He lived with his mother. Then when his mother passed away, he lived in that house. It was him and his films. He would work, long days. And finding stock footage for the show was maybe 2% of what he did.
Yep.
Shecky was just everybody's pal. And Shecky had a photographic mind for that show and knew every bit, every detail. And he was like my sidekick. Shecky, I used to have to pick a woman named Sue Hall, used to find the stupid Petricks. And, she'd show us videotape and we'd decide what Petricks we'd have on. And then before the show, we'd rehearse them and it would be Sue and me. And for some reason, Shecky became a part of that operation. Had nothing to do with what his job was, but I always felt comfortable having Shecky by my side, looking at stupid Petricks. So Shecky would say, no. And I go, really, Shecky? That's a good one. He goes, nope. And he was always right on with which one we'd lead with, which one we'd end with. And Shecky was invaluable. But what I found surprising in depth with Shecky is how broad his network is, how many true friends and dear friends he had. We always imagined him to be this lonely guy who went home at night and looked at movies. But he had such an active social life and had such an active, curiosity of film and the arts and so many deep friendships with people that mattered and had such intelligent conversations and Leonard Maltin writing a piece about him, Alex, it really opened up a whole new appreciation for what Rick was about.
Yeah.
I love the recognition that he got in death.
Me too.
So for me, it was so oddly enough enjoyable to see. It made me proud of him.
Speaking of successors,
he would, his travel pictures where he never smiles, and he was hilarious. He was
in Antarctica with resting bitch face. Yes, absolutely.
I used to wonder. He would go on vacations with Brian McAloon, who was a director and an associate director in the beginning. And they'd go on cruises. And I think, what the fuck do these guys do on these cruises? Are they going after women? I just never got what he was doing. I always thought he was just this lonely guy, but he had this rich life that was so nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Barbara Gaines.
Barbara Gaines, with Kathy and with Jude and with Rick, they were the heart and soul of the operation.
Yeah.
Barbara, what I like most, and I don't talk to Barbara much, and I adore her. And we used to be good friends. We were the two Jews on the show. So, Barbara, I love how she matured. Barbara was goofy. Barbara was a fucking goofball. She and Jude would sit in that production office smoking like chimneys. It would stink, right? And she was like a kid, and everybody, Barbara, and she talking a high voice. And then all of a sudden she became, the producer and the executive producer. And, I wasn't there to observe it firsthand, but I always got a kick out of how she stepped up and became this powerhouse. She's a good woman.
Don Giller.
He's a fucking bum. This guy latched on to the shows that I produced, put his own fucking name, Don's TV, whatever the fuck that is, and has co-opted my work. Don's a good guy. Don, everybody relies on Don. I always used to love seeing him outside the theater when he was a nothing. He was a little street urchin who used to hang outside the theater. But I adore Don. I'm so glad that he's part of the team after all these years.
After 20 years, I didn't really see him or speak to him much at all. There was a long gap between like mid-90s and 2015. It's like 2 weeks or so before his very last telecast of Late Show. And I had just called up and said, could I just come up and say hello? And thank you and stuff like that. And his assistant said yes. And I came up, we sat there for like 2 hours. But the little funny moment that pertains to your documentary, whoops,
is right there.
The funny moment, yes, that pertains to your documentaries. When I hadn't laid eyes on Letterman in 2 decades, he comes out and I go, hi, Dave, there's not really a very good reason for me being here. And he said, come to that, Stephen. I don't have one either. And we laughed over it. It was kind of my justified humility and his kind of higher contrast humility. Yes. But it was fun, and we had a very nice conversation. And I will also say that a certain amount of self-doubt and self-examination is probably good, because I think you've got to keep checking yourself. Absolutely. But you also have to keep your eye on what you're good at and what is the thing you do probably better in your own way than anyone else. And when the Letterman show was starting up, I had that feeling about that. Like, I can do this, and if they don't see that I am just right for them, then they're crazy. But it turns out they weren't crazy, or they were crazy in some other way. But they did see the aproposness. I mean, it was a thing I wanted to do more than anything else in my life. You have high school guidance counselors. Maybe you get into this kind of thing. Absolutely. Tell you, find that thing you love and go do it. I was never quite sure what it was. I liked cartooning. I liked writing. I liked history. I liked music. Yep. But most of the job decisions I made were like sort of 75%. Like, yeah, I guess so. But the Letterman job was something I wanted 100%.
If I get up in front of a group of people and start talking, Betsy, my wife, points this out all the time. I start doing Dave's hand gestures. I start picking up, using his rhythms. And it's just because for years, I was just laser focused on this guy. Yep. Here's George Miller's joke.
This is a great way to finish right here.
What's Letterman's, and he did it on stage, so I'm not fucking with it. What's David Letterman's idea of foreplay? Let's get on with it, shall we?
So Mike Chisholm, I think he's better than Christ.
This is the Chisholm podcast.
He's fantastic.
We're doing the Chisholm podcast.
Mike Chisholm, I don't know, this makes me so happy.
You've heard his reputation. Everybody loves Mike.
Everyone likes Mike.
Think of the nicest person you know. He's nicer than
Ask 10 and 20.
He is the nicest. Mother Teresa, forget about Mike Chisholm.
Not in the same league.
Not at all. League of his own. He's better than this strawberry, and this strawberry is delicious.
we once got in trouble. I don't know if I've ever told this story to any guy. After the shows, we used to have cars waiting for us. I'd have a car, Letterman would have a car. My deal with NBC was I would get and it wasn't a limo, it was, a black radio.
Like a town car with a driver kind of a thing. Yeah.
To take me one way. So I could take it home at night or I could take it to work in the morning, but I had a one-way trip every day. That was my deal. Very generous of them.
Yeah.
So I always used to take it out to go out at night and, go to the theater, go to restaurants and do my thing. So one night I'm leaving and it's when I came down through the studio entrance right in the middle there at 30 Rock.
Yeah.
And I walked out on the 49th Street side to get my car, which was facing west. So I'm walking into the little corridor. Do you know 30 Rock?
I do.
There's a small corridor on 49th Street, and there's a single revolving door.
Yep.
So in the corridor, I see John Gotti has a guy by the collar and is screaming at this fucking guy. You motherfucker, you fuck that, blah, 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 blah. And I stop in my tracks, right? I get into the car and my driver said, did you see Gotti with Letterman's driver? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, that's Letterman's driver. He goes, that's the guy driving Letterman home. So it was just when cell phones came out and I remember I had a Motorola flip phone and I called Letterman's office and I go, I don't know if this concerns you, but John Gotti has the guy that's driving your car against the wall and he's screaming at him and Letterman then gets crazy. He's going to kill me. He wants me. They're going to kill me. I'm telling you something. And of course he didn't take that car. He got another car. But the backstory where Hal comes into it was Letterman had done a joke in the monologue about the mafia. And unbeknownst to any of us, one of the crew was friendly with John Gotti's daughter, Victoria, and got tickets to the show. And she was a blonde with big hair and very flashy. So Letterman did a joke about the mafia, not knowing that Gotti's daughter was sitting in there, and Hal, being the perceptive director that he was, right after the joke is delivered, Hal does a cutaway to Gotti's daughter.
Yeah.
So after the show, the crew member comes up to me and to Hal, and he goes, guys, that was Gotti's daughter that you cut away to. So I said, well, what are we going to do? We got to edit it out. So this was well before the car incident. So Letterman kind of put the two together and thought, Gotti's killing me because I did a cutaway. I said, Dave, we edited it out. It was never on. Yeah, but she knew and told her father. Yeah, it was just a whole crazy thing. That was one of my many John Gotti.
Okay. I was going to ask you, did you talk to anybody?
He was, the guy, the Godfather that was out every night. And I was out every night. I used to go to this one restaurant, Columbus Restaurant. And he was there one night. And I asked the owner of the restaurant, I said, I want to meet Gotti. I go, can you introduce me to him? So he goes, well, I'll have to ask him. And I see him walk over to Gotti and he whispers to Gotti and Gotti just goes like that. Just shakes his head no and comes back. He goes, oh, he's a little busy now. So, but another time I was at a club and there was this woman that I was talking to on the dance floor. And she was just a real horrible person. And I think I said to her, you fucking skank, whatever I said to her. Cut to, I'm walking out and I see she's making out with Gotti.
Oh, no.
I'm thinking, holy shit, I'm a dead man here. I just called Gotti's girlfriend a skank or whatever the hell I said to her because she was being a jerk. It was like an old Abbott and Costello movie where I'm trying to sneak against the wall and edge my way out of the place. It was at Regine's nightclub on Park Avenue. And I'm trying to sneak out of the club without anybody seeing me.
Yeah.
As I get to where Gotti is, a bunch of Gotti's henchmen pick this woman out, pick her up, and throw her out the front door of the restaurant. They physically threw her out. So I say to one of the guys, I go, what was that all about? He goes, this strange girl just started making out with Gotti. And as she's kissing him, she's trying to steal his pinky ring.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, what a great souvenir that would have been. The Godfather's pinky ring. Are you kidding? So I lived to see another day. It was, it was a great feeling.
That's what they call chutzpah, I think.
When we went to CBS, also from being out, I became friendly with Bruce Cutler, who was Gotti's attorney, right? Who was a mafioso guy. He was a Jewish guy, but he had like a 19-inch neck with red tight suits, and he was always out. And I liked him. I always liked talking to him. And we were talking about going to CBS, and he wanted to make my deal for me. He said, let me make you a deal for you. I said, Bruce. And and it's the one thing I regret over the years, not having, I took it so seriously because, it was a big break. It was a big show. I'm the executive producer finally.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the sense of irony or the sense of humor at the time to kind of say, oh, that'd be great. Go ahead, Bruce, make my deal. Go up to Brandon Tartikoff's office and scare the shit out of him. Today I would have, in hindsight, it was a missed opportunity for me to have the greatest story ever. It's not a bad story to begin with. So I did not let him make my deal. Very faded, so I don't know if you'll be able to see it.
Okay.
I had a girlfriend who owned a restaurant in Brooklyn, right across from the Brooklyn courthouse.
Yep.
And Gotti is on trial for murder. And it was on Clark Street in Brooklyn. And for some reason, I don't know if this is standard procedure, but they used to let Gotti go out with his boys for lunch. He was up for murder. I don't think he even had parole, but they'd let him go. Oh. So he'd go to my girlfriend's little gourmet shop restaurant where, she'd make all the food. They had like 4 or 5 tables there. And he would pay her, he'd give her $1,000 and say, all right, we're taking over. But he insisted on doing all the cooking. He'd get behind the counter and make all the sandwiches and fry all the burgers and do whatever, he loved doing it. So he did it one day, then the next day. And the whole trial, he would eat there every day. So I said, get me a Gotti's autograph. Please get me Gotti's autograph. So she gets me an autograph. I don't know if you could make it out. It's very faint.
Oh, yeah. No, there it is right there.
But basically what it says is, Rob, you owe me one. And in parentheses, the number 1. And it's signed Don Gotti.
There it is.
Rob, you owe me one.
There it is. And I heard something about you getting a little one of these from him or something like that. He did this from across the room or something. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I don't remember that one.
Okay. Well, no, but
but I had many brushes with Gotti. I used to see Gotti out on the town a lot. Yep. He was a very visible figure in the 1980s and early 90s. I once saw him after I left. It was after I left Letterman. I'm just thinking. I got hired by a company to go to Branson, Missouri. And they wanted to do this guy, this promoter, with my help. We had a meeting with Monty Hall. All right.
Oh.
And what we wanted to do was do a live version of Let's Make a Deal in Branson, Missouri, at one of the theaters, and people would come all dressed up, and we'd get a good host. It wouldn't be Monty Hall or somebody like that, but we'd get a decent host, and we'd do a show every single day, not televised, but do a live show, and people would pay to get in, whatever.
Absolutely.
Win big money. And, we were the first to have that. Now I think they do a lot of game show things down there.
Yeah.
Or if there is a Branson still. So we had to go down to Branson for like 5 days. And you fly into this little airport, and I was leaving, and I see Gotti's brother, Peter Gotti, who I had recognized, Gotti's wife, Gotti's daughter, and Gotti's son. He was in the federal penitentiary in Missouri, right by Branson.
Wow.
So they, and this airport was, there was one gate. there was one gate. It was a little house, like a little, looked like a little cabin, had one gate and maybe, 15 seats in the waiting room. And I, of course, see them. So I sit myself very close to them just to eavesdrop.
Yep.
And all they were talking about, we can't tell them this, and we made a mistake by telling them this. And it was great. It was great. In Branson, Missouri, I have a brush with the Gottis. It was terrific.
The American
we did
Muscle.
A video. We did a secret video. So during there's that big long writer's strike.
Yep.
Yeah. That went on forever. I forget, like in the third, or I really it's like the third year of the show.
Yeah.
Fourth. And
the mid '80s writer's strike.
During that time, Dave turned 40.
Yeah.
So Betsy and I and Hal and Lori Guthrie and Kevin Kay, Jude Brennan, Barbara Gaines, started. The original idea was just to tape random people on the street saying happy birthday to Dave, and we'd cut it together and send it to him. Somebody gets it in their head, oh, why don't we have some of Dave's friends in it? So now we've got shots of a telephone with a microphone hooked up to it and Steve Martin calling and saying hi to Dave. And then we start combing through NBC, and there's Tom Brokaw and the NBC personalities. Sure. Then it branches out into, we could go to get the Yankees, and so Betsy goes to Yankee Stadium with Lori Guthrie and gets Billy Martin and George Steinbrenner. At the same exact time, I'm getting Richard Nixon.
Holy crap.
So we had Nixon, Mayor Koch, Jane Pauley, all these people. And
it's like you're gophers and you've been digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging for so long in your little hole. And then you pop your head up and realize, holy shit, we've done a whole field here.
We didn't realize, holy shit.
The impact.
Right?
Yeah.
And so send the tape. We just sent the tape to Dave on his birthday. He gets it. He's home in California.
Holy crap.
Like a day later, I just get a phone call, and I pick up the phone. This was the days before caller ID, right? Yeah. Hello, and he goes, Nixon. How the fuck did you get Nixon? And here's the story. This is even better. So Nixon was in a recording studio in New York City, recording some voiceover for something.
He just happened to be in a place with recording devices, which, by the way, not a good thing.
So Frank Gannon was a segment producer on the show.
Okay.
Frank
I got you.
Worked in the Nixon White House.
I got you.
So that's how we got to Nixon. So we're all getting into an elevator after everything's all done, and everybody's kind of crowding in, and Nixon's there, and the door starts to close.
Yeah.
And I got to the door a little too late, and it literally slammed Nixon up against the wall of the elevator. Not too hard, but like an elevator, and then it bounced back.
Hard enough.
And Frank forever was like, you fucking let the door slam on Nixon. You could have reached your arm in. I said, I just didn't. I blame my subconscious for that. I blame my unconscious self for letting the door slam. But yeah, I don't know how we got into that. That's something that will never see the light of day. It will never see the light of day. There's a couple of things that I did on remotes that A, will never see the light of day, and B, I'll never tell you about.
Okay, well, and fair enough. And I've
they
had
were really fun.
Those.
They were very. Yeah. It got very personal.
Yeah,
or something. Yeah.
Can you talk about Gary Shandling? Talk about that for a moment.
I knew Gary, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was going out to LA for auditions or seeing somebody, some executive, I don't know who, probably Moonves.
Yeah.
And because we were doing Raymond. No, it might have been before that. But I used to go out to Moonves and try to get him jazzed up about Ray Romano. And I remember having a meeting with him and saying to him, this is the guy that you're going to pull out for every press tour. This is the guy you're going to pull out for every affiliate convention. And Moonves was, yeah, just do your fucking pilot. He didn't care. He did not care at all. It was funny. It was very funny. But I went out to LA, and it was just about the time. Did you remember MGM Grand Air?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
It was like a flying green room. It was every celebrity in the world. I remember Barry Sand telling me that he once sat next to Elizabeth Taylor on MGM, and it was like you'd see people. So Gary was on that flight. So we sat together, and he goes, "Hey, while you're in LA, why don't you do my show?" So I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" He goes, "We'll figure something out. Don't worry." 2 days later, I'm on the stage, taping filming the part. On stage acting with Rip Torn. I was intimidated as all hell.
I bet.
Gary didn't bother me. I was fine with him. But Rip Torn, it was intimidating having to act. Not really. I would hardly call what I did acting, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And Rip Torn was very reassuring. "You're doing great, kid. You're doing great." It's funny.
But all around
the episode where they were at this award show.
Yes.
You remember I have the award right here if you'd like.
No, really?
Hold on.
It's not an Emmy, but they kind of made it look like it was an Emmy. And Dave, and he offers it to Gary. And Gary, come on, go ahead, take it. What, really?
Don can confirm that this is the award.
Oh, this is excellent. That's excellent.
It's called the American Television Award, right? And it was an idea of the former late Laugh-In producer, George Slaughter. And he had this idea, let's have an award show to compete with the Emmys.
Yep.
And, when you create an award show, you have to have you have to follow all the standards and practices in the network. So you have to really have a voting body. You have to abide by certain rules. I mean, it's a whole big thing. You can't just say, we're going to give out awards. There has to be the standards and practices. So he created this award, and Letterman won for best show. And I think the only reason he went out was because Gary had this idea to do Larry Sanders backstage.
Yep.
So that was the episode.
Before this is off the air. Before we go on, before the tape started rolling, the band would come out and play for the audience, and I always have a big supply of custom picks, guitar picks, and I would throw one or two out into the audience, right?
Cool.
And it would be just picks. I don't know whether it be my signature picks or glow in the dark picks or whatever. And they weren't always colored white until this thing happened. I had learned that a lady had gotten hit in the eye during the warm-up of the show. But because tickets were so hard to come by, she wasn't going to leave her seat. She was going to stay there for the whole duration in pain, and ended up having to go to the hospital, eye infection, and I think they were threatening to sue the show. But
Wow.
Dave thought it was cool, so I kept doing it.
Also, you got to admire the commitment of the lady to stay there.
Yes, differently, of course.
Sure.
I would threw them differently, and I had them paint. They had them colored white after that too. So, and I threw them completely different, not a straight on.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just a complete ridiculous aside.
I'm fascinated. I would love to have some of the alum on here, maybe a few of you at the same time, and talk.
I'm not an alum. I have coasted for years on people thinking that I went to Harvard. So it worked for me with Dave because I went to Notre Dame.
Okay. So where's the Lampoon? Because you wrote for them as a pseudonym.
No, I wrote for the National Lampoon.
Oh, you wrote for the National Lampoon. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's part of the misconception.
So for years, when people when it worked to my advantage to have people assume I went to Harvard, I just kept my fucking mouth shut. When it worked to my advantage to go, those fucking Harvard boys, I would play that card. It worked great for me.
You wrote for the National Lampoon under a pseudonym, right?
No, I know I wrote it in my own name, but this is a good. I'll tell this story as quickly as I can because it's a good story. Obviously, the two founders of the National Lampoon, were Doug Kenny and Henry Beard.
Okay,
and both of them were Harvard boys.
Yep.
And Doug was. I met Doug once, but Doug was a fucking our sense of humor. If you can track from Animal House through Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
That is mine. That is all a direct connection to Doug Kenny and the National Lampoon.
And to many Gen Xers, a religious journey right there, what you just said.
There you go. So there's Doug. There's Doug.
Yeah.
Doug goes to Hollywood,
makes
Caddyshack, and then falls to his death tragically in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Kevin, by the way, lived with Doug for a summer. So there you go. So after Doug, a guy named P.J. O'Rourke took over the National Lampoon, conservative humorist, P.J. O'Rourke. And then after that, there was a guy named Jerry Sussman, who basically was kind of just keeping the magazine running.
Okay.
Jerry hired me as a copy editor because I could copy edit. I knew how to copy edit. I had come up in newspapers. I knew how to do that, but I also knew how to copy edit in a way that wouldn't kill the joke. Right. So if it's misspelled or there's stuff missing or whatever, I know, oh, that's a joke. That's why it's, and I'm not like somebody going like, anyway. So and I start pitching ideas and I get a bunch of stuff on. Yeah. Jerry leaves the Lampoon and Sean Kelly, who was one of the original National Lampoon people, and I are in a room one day. That room is probably a bar. And we decide to create a fictional editor-in-chief that is an amalgam of all the past editor-in-chiefs.
Oh, that's genius.
And we called him L. Dennis Plunkett. And L. Dennis's editorials at the beginning of every issue were always Webster defines satire as, they were just horribly pretentious and terrible. And then it would begin to reveal how he worried about, this was a Henry Beard reference, how his family never forgave Roosevelt for how he got us out of the Depression because, Mama lost all of her, Pa lost all of his, fortune. Right?
What a beautiful device.
And then when mail came in to L. Dennis, I would answer it. And so somebody wrote in one time and said that I also had to answer the slush pile. And if there was somebody who was kind of close and like we really actually wanted to reply to, I would reply to them. And then they'd write again and I go, it didn't work out this time. Thank you so much. And somebody decided that they were unhappy with the way they'd been treated by me. And they wrote to L. Dennis. L. Dennis wrote back to him and said, thank you so much for helping me get the goods on this Graver guy. I have been trying. If you could just Xerox the correspondence, I will get on this right away. Then the guy Xeroxed the correspondence and sent it in. And then I just got a pang of conscience and just dropped it. I thought, this is cruel. This poor guy, he thinks he's got it in at the Lampoon now. And I said, I just sent him a kind of like, thank you very much. This is under investigation or something like that. But I felt bad. I felt like, oh, geez. So it probably, Morning Fred felt bad about what.
There it is.
Done. And so, so that was that.
Another song that I love singing was Weak as I Am by Skunk and Nancy. That was one of my favorites. And all my favorites were like kickoff songs.
Yeah.
And by kickoff songs, I mean the ones that we would start the set with. The first song after the monologue would be the kickoff song.
There was one, and I'm gonna. This could be a high wire act that just I fall on my face on. There was one that you did the lead vocals on that going out to commercial. It started like this, bub up, bub up, bub up, bub 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 up, bub up, bub up, bub bub, and then you kicked into the vocal right away after that. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say that?
No.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I'll find it and I'll send it to you because I know that I know.
Now I want to know. It's like, I want to know.
And then you kicked right into a vocal on it. I always loved when you sang, and it was so cool whenever you had a highlight performance. Don just said that I might have been thinking of Soul Survivors, Express Way to Your Heart.
Oh!
I think that's it. I think that's exactly the song, actually. There it is. And then you kick right in.
What did I tell you? Yeah. I've been trying to get to you.
There it is. Thank you. Oh my God. That's the moment.
Right. Oh my God.
You just gave me goosebumps, girl. You just put them all over me just by doing that.
Don Giller, I love you. That's a song I snatched from my childhood. And Paul let me do it. Like that's what I meant. Like you could just ask for things and it would happen. That's why I love that gig so much. I would just pull songs that meant something to me as a child. And next thing I know, we're doing it on television. How could you not love a gig like that? How could you not?
Let me quickly explain what we're doing. We're putting together a show here, not for American television, so don't let this stuff alarm you, okay? Part of what you see tonight will actually be on the air, and then there are two specific segments that will never be seen anywhere.
Overcoat and underpants.